Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today it's a big one, the top 50 best songs of 2024. It's become a routine theme with this list and that of my favorite albums of the year in order to reflect on whether it was a year where songs or albums dominated more of my attention, whether it was more individual cuts or something more holistic. Now in 2022 it felt like there were so many uniquely transcendent songs they won out. In 2023 it was more albums for, well, certain reasons, and in 2024 it feels like the pendulum has swung back towards songs, but not for the reasons you might think. Now it's hard to diagnose individual cases. Categorizing all the music of an entire year, especially when you can't hear it all, it's kind of a fool's errand, let alone my aggregated opinion on it. But in my experience, if there are albums that feel utterly transcendent, that may become labeled as classics beyond all but the highest competition, they tend to tilt the balance in that direction. However, if there's more competition for that album top spot, it seems like individual songs might have a bit of an edge. Not only is the likelihood of getting one immense diamond shining in the rough kind of higher than the whole mineral cache, and that you can find one pretty much anywhere, including where you would least expect it, but they're also free of the obligations of cohesion or other factors that are kind of unique to an aggregate art form like the album. Factor in the one-off songs that encapsulated certain cultural moments, yes, we'll get to them, believe me, and my list of the best songs of 2024 feels far easier to at least defend than my albums list, even coming from a year where a singles-driven format like pop didn't always impress me as much as it did seemingly everyone else. And in comparison with last year, where so many songs were tied to very emotionally charged moments for me that could be kind of difficult to discuss, this list feels a lot more streamlined and focused and resonant. Not saying there weren't powerful emotions being evoked here, but there's a lot less trauma this time around, and that's always a good thing. And as always, if you want to see my personal top 100, the entries 100 to 51 are on Blue Sky exclusively, and if you're going to complain that this list leans kind of heavy on the country or the hip-hop, come on, it's me. I've been making these lists for over a decade now. When some of you were still in grade school, you know what you're dealing with here. In fact, you know what? Let's get things started with...
I guess maybe things are different now, but Daddy, can't you still take me out to the ball game?
Look, I'm not surprised that certain albums are going to go overlooked, but where for as much as I hear online whinging about a lack of positive male or masculine role models, and then recognize everybody, including the music industry, seem to forget that Luke Combs made an album this year exploring the many dimensions of the relationships between fathers and sons, well, you know what, you start seeing the creepy grift for what it is. But beyond the album, this was really the excellent neo-traditional country song that really stuck for me. Baseball is a sport that has a lot of resonance in my family going back to my childhood, and Luke Combs using it as the undercurrent of his story between a young boy and his parents' divorce, it's truly heartbreaking. The kid who actually wrongly blames himself for his parents' split, it's a lot more common than anyone wants to admit, and the straightforward plea for any distraction or just a connection really hits. This song came out of nowhere for me to punch me in the gut. It's a really ballsy album closer, but yeah, it's worth it.
I know he said it wouldn't work out, and I believed it then, but now it's different. He wants a one-night stand. I want a life full of nights with him.
Okay, look, I might have been cooler on Anniversary than Adeem the Artist's last two albums, but this was my easy favorite from the project and probably the best example how the meteor arrangement and production can make their storytelling so compelling. The groove and guitars are louder and punchier, especially that hook. There's more playful and brawny energy, and yet the tender edges of Adeem's writing still translates, highlighting how queer love stories can, have, and deserve this flavor too. How often in mainstream country do we get the one-night stand songs where there is yearning for a little bit more? Adeem just adds those note-perfect details that highlight men who can bitch about the patriarchy and appreciate Loretta Lynn alongside black coffee in the morning after. It's just so warm, endlessly charming, a lane in which Adeem the Artist really excels. So yeah, terrific song.
Everybody at the bar getting tipsy.
Yeah, I already said my piece on this one in my last list of the best hit songs of 2024. What can I tell you? I had an absolute blast with it all year, even with all the overplay. Now, given how low it was on said list, you might think you know what's coming here, but keep in mind a significant chunk of the songs above it on my best hits were from previous years and earlier albums that would not qualify. So while some overlap is coming, it's not overwhelming per se. But still, Shaboozie's Hangdog energy's infectious, the fiddle sounds terrific. I love the flip of Tipsy as some note-perfect 2000s nostalgia. I just know it's going to be a karaoke staple in a couple of years. But speaking of perhaps, let's call it unexpected country crossovers with a lot of sing-along, dance-ready appeal.
Let me take you on a midnight ride, baby, you and I. Ooh, so much we could explore. Pull me closer under moonlit skies, fire in your eyes. Ooh, you got me burning.
I saw so much backlash to this song, and it frustrated me so much. Yeah, my opinions on Diplo remain very low, and that new Kylie Minogue album this year wasn't any good, but I've always been inordinately fond of a country western track with a more dance-ready electronic beat that actually has some groove to it. I stuck up for the Zac Brown Band with Tomorrow Never Comes from Jekyll and Hyde in 2015. You thought I wasn't gonna praise this? And there are so many fine details that I really like about this fusion. The whistle, the deeper guitars and bells that build into that sandy two-step, the fact that everyone in this song acknowledges that none of this is gonna last on the bridge, but the simmer in the moment is just killer. I love that Orville Peck isn't above how utterly camp this song is, and in my opinion, way too much fun to dismiss it. Check it out. The problem with the Everything Everything album Mountainhead this year is that, well, like at least 6 songs from it could be contenders for the list. It was that long and stacked enough to have so many glorious melodic moments, even before you start untangling the album's rich conceptual arc, and there's a lot there. So for the first of the songs from it to make this list, I went with the smoky penultimate track, with the restrained groove and the guitar glimmers that snap the story back into the grayscale capitalist hellscape, where the protagonist actually tries to quit and nobody even knows who he is. And while some of the money is coming in, the sense of lonely isolation through routine highlights how so much of this city life and a bad system lacking a true core can be draining on the soul, where the desperate message of trying to find hope, to find that community, gives the song that real purpose, that real heart, especially as the wheedling synth accents that final guitar solo. After a project that can feel so crushing and bleak in its immensity and progress, this is the breather and the message that I think we all needed.
Wake up, A cup, get your tits up in my makeup, face fuck, get your bake up, fake bluff, fake tough, niggas dick suck, put your 6 up for the motherfucking princess, rates up, jigs up, put your dicks up, get your dick sucked, put your motherfucking sticks up, they suck, that's tough, nigga, pay up, get your rates up for the motherfucking princess.
Okay, yes, I know that Doechie's pushing Denial as a river. It's quirky, the video's hilarious, it showcases more personality than just being a sheer spitter, but goddamn, when Doechii is just showing how great of a rapper she is for just over 2 minutes, it's fantastic to behold. The muted melody as the bass royal crushes in, the double time, the sheer expressive energy, the fusion of sleek glamour with vibrantly black swagger and queerness to boot. The line, the new hip-hop Madonna, I'm the Trap Grace Jones, it is stuck in my head since I heard it. The latter is such a great, unique flex beyond just cussing everyone out who's broke and talking shit. I've been familiar with Doechii since I reviewed her very strong EP back in 2022, but this song and the tape behind it really secured her come up proper. No more Kodak Black collaborations required. All of this.
Twirl your hair like you don't care that no one's sat beside you, and you're begging for it now. Wallflower.
Now, for those of you who don't know indie country, Silverado is the rebrand of Mike and the Moonpies, with a slightly more expansive, even Americana touch sound. And while I really like their album from this year, which I think got a little bit underrated by folks who didn't like the name change, this was the standout for me. The thicker bass line, the sizzling organ, the pedal steel, the faster guitars that highlight just how sharp this band's technical chops are for the sort of song to draw the wildflowers onto the dance floor with some fiery flair. And while I'm not normally the biggest fan of this sort of subject matter on a song, let people stand by the wall and drink, goddammit. The fact that they seed the majority of the song just stacking up the instrumental solos and then bending across key changes, it's exactly the right choice. Make them want it as much as you might want it. It's ridiculously fun. You probably missed it. You shouldn't have.
I got a sore throat from sucking you off. You got on my baddies and I paid the cost.
This is probably going to be one of the most contentious inclusions on this list. From a mediocre Neon Trees album, a very raw acoustic track with the lyrics, I got a sore throat from sucking you off. And it's played entirely straight, no pun intended. But Tyler Glenn not only sells it, he surrounds it with a deeply sad song about committing to a long-term relationship that's kind of run its course and it's not working because both are lying to each other about how much they need each other, not helped by his substance abuse issues where he's clinging to this toxic connection for all of the wrong reasons. What this most feels like are those rock bottom ballads that a lot of strung out rock stars write when it's all fallen apart and quite frankly they got nowhere else to go. But what's truly sad here is that in order to preserve something, they're gonna keep on acting and the emotional distance becomes all the more pronounced and effective. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, kind of hard to take seriously, but in the right moments, really strikes home.
Why you got teardrops in the club? Are you missing me or the drugs right now? Are you seeing memories of us right now? Are you just needing a little love right now?
The frustrating thing with Kalani is that every couple of years, for as many missteps and bad producers that they work with, they absolutely can strike gold, and this is one of their best songs to date. I love the Afrobeat patter around the gauzy synths that really switches up both the hook for the more jagged keys and that faster third verse. I love their simmering contempt on that hook, where they question how much their ex is really missing them or the drugs right now, where Omalay is a great foil to all that. And I love how no grace is offered. The sense of history across the song feels palpable as Kalani sneers at whoever treated them so badly. It's kind of kicking them while they're down, and it's not exactly a good look, but when the groove is so damn tight and you get the impression that Kalani is only barely holding it together as it is themselves, yeah, this hits. We couldn't make this the stateside Afrobeats crossover hit this year? Really?
Twice emotional stability, a sound body and tranquility. I deserve it all. Like mines and less enemies. Stock investments, more entities. I deserve it all.
I have talked about this song in both my extended review of GNX and on Billboard Breakdown, and while it is not my favorite Kendrick Lamar track from this year, it is probably his most honest, staring at the wreckage that he's left in his wake and then the ambition to properly take the crown that he believes is his own, that he deserves. And while you could make the argument that it falls into a very black capitalist paradigm where if it wasn't Kendrick Lamar saying it, I would have a lot more justified critique, but what Kendrick gets right in this moment is not exactly playing it as celebratory, but as slow, meditative brooding with shuddering percussion in a very slow build until the third verse crashes out. He played the game the right way, and he won the right way, but he's not truly happy because the consequences of all that success weren't exactly pretty. And the religious garden comparison that I've always made is Gethsemane, where may you get what you deserve is as much of a curse as it is a blessing, and Kendrick knows that. I've always preferred the shameless Kendrick over the famous Kendrick. I think he does too, where he actually does go there for all of his flaws, and this is him owning that moment, and it's excellent for it.
Trust and desire, trust and
Not exactly a lot to say about this one, beyond the fact that when I heard Kelly Lee Owens end off Dream State with those strings that were so just goddamn gorgeous, I basically knew it was on my year-end list by default. Kind of reminded me of Distant Sky by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Admittedly, it was going to be higher. The soft ambient pianos, Owens' gorgeous voice, the auto-tune change-up on the second half, the focus post-heartbreak to move on in the right direction, trusting that the right love will come, all of which is just note perfect to end off the album. It's ethereal and beautiful in the best ways possible, so maybe it says something that more songs wound up above it. Either way, it's the best sort of deep cut on a criminally underrated album. I think it's transcendent. For many, this was Sierra Farrell's breakout year beyond just being an indie country critical darling. I include myself in that. We'll get to more of that in the albums list. But if you want the easiest anthemic banger in order to sell the album, it's this track. The sawing fiddle and banjo, the Celtic-inspired melody, the stacked vocals, that pulse-pounding groove that just keeps ramping up, the fiddle solo. It's got this feel of a medieval hunting song from a different era that at that tempo is just thrilling. Not exactly a song that evokes a lot of thought so much as a desire to run wild in the forest, and in 2024, yeah, definitely clicked.
All this time that I've been loving you, so I'm coming to keep you near. This is a dream worth dying for. It's now or never.
You know, as the resident Marianas Trench fan who is a little bit cooler on Haven compared to their best output, I feel obligated to mention that they could still deliver titanic pop rock bangers with the best of them. The pulsing gloss of the synth, the fact that Josh Ramsey could steal Zed's ticking clock gimmick and make a much better song than he frankly ever has and ever will, the huge spacious warp of the power ballad hook, and in the context of the album, that mix of wonder and dread, where you know that the choice is in the hero's journey, and the meta text of Marianas Trench, where they could be running back to the figure whose presence has really haunted them for decades. And Josh Ramsey sells it with that sheer abandon. This is probably the most accessible song on the entire album, and while even Canadian radio seems to have finally passed them by, to quite frankly everyone's detriment up here, there are a few in this lane who can do it better. I'm standing on that.
When I'm on stage, sometimes I lie. Say that I love singing these songs you left behind. And I know you always said it's okay to cry. So I know I couldn't cry, so I cried.
So I said before that I didn't really have a brat summer. I don't really want to rehash why I'm way cooler on this album than the majority. Go take a look at my review. But the reason why this song has always stuck for me is because it throws away any veneers of ironic deflection and cool for something that's very raw and real in its commemoration of Sophie. Certainly a lot better than that posthumous album released on Sophie's behalf this year. And it's a sort of grief you can tell that Charlie XCX is still processing. The passing of a peer and a forward-thinking, intense genius where Charlie wishes she was closer and had spent more time with her while she was alive, which kind of struck a chord with me as someone who has always struggled to embrace Sophie's experimentation. And with the spare metallic clouds around the fluttery keys and the auto-tuned outro, the subdued grief and the interpolation of "It's Okay to Cry," I think it's heartbreaking. Probably nobody else's favorite song from Brad. It's certainly not one of the bangers compared to, well, the rest of the album. But for me, it wasn't gonna be anything else.
I'll be a backseat baby, driving you crazy anytime you like. Whoa, I'll be your shotgun rider till the day I die.
Okay, this should have have been a hit, full stop, and if Beyonce had bothered to properly promote it, it probably would have at least had a radio run, or one that went longer than it did. Suffice to say, if you're looking for the country torch song and collab that I did not expect to work nearly as well as it did, To Most Wanted feels like something special. I love the peeling guitars around the gentle acoustic groove with some of the touches of strings, with the perfect fiddle that comes in for that final hook, the shockingly great chemistry between Miley Cyrus and Beyonce as they harmonize off of each other. I think it comes from both of them understanding the give and take of this track, and then having the actual firepower to keep up with each other, and also the sort of winsome outlaw tenderness where the queer coding just kind of happened along the way. It's a truly fantastic song. It just deserved way more.
Now and then she rereads the manuscript of the entire torrid affair. They compared their licenses. He said, I'm not a donor, but I'd give you my heart if you needed it.
So over this year, I think I've cooled considerably on the Tortured Poets Department anthology. It kind of feels like a collection of B-sides backloaded onto the project for everyone who wanted more of the folklore, evermore style of writing and production. And as someone who can actually appreciate that and pop Taylor Swift, I hold that material to a slightly different standard, and I tend to be a lot harder on it. But the manuscript as a closer is one of the best metatextual songs that Taylor Swift has ever written. The sort of plain-spoken piano ballad with only slight arranged touches from Aaron Dessner as you see her try to write her way out of trauma and heartbreak. And I like how frank she is about the mechanics of creating art out of that pain. The horrible feeling of being praised for being wise beyond her years for doing so, forced to be too adult until she was more so than a lot of her peers, and once she's found catharsis, the just as sharp realization it's not for her anymore. She's got to let it go. If Clara Bow wasn't the album closer of the standard edition, this should have been it. Truly special.
I don't bet on boys, they just love you, leave you blue. But make it to my doorstep, I might roll the dice on you.
Okay, I swear, I didn't purposefully intend this to show up as the 34th entry. It's just a coincidence that happens to kick so much ass just like the song does. And really, this track feels like the justification for Japandroids' final send-off and not the obvious Bob Dylan reference. The smoky waves of jangling guitars that Brian King slowly gets louder as he reflects on that fire-eyed girl that he met at a bar and caught his eye down in New Orleans, and she dared him to take a proper chance on her. I didn't think it was possible for the line, I hit send, to soar that hard, but Japandroids kind of nailed the swell, and that sense of desperate uncertainty in order to take the chance, and the sense of relief that we get from that outro, where even if it was all for naught, he still got a song out of it. What a rush. I know there was a lot of folks who didn't want this to be the last of Japandroids. Put it alongside those who didn't even know Japandroids were active or releasing anything this year, but if you're gonna go out like this.
You must have heard about me. Everyone knows my name. Everyone knows I'm holy.
I'm still a little in awe of this song. The filthy saxophone, the galloping grooves, the manic guitars, the textured percussion that's trying to recreate Copacabana vibes, the barroom sleaze and bravado. It's trying to be a little classy and slick, but still has some of that sweaty desperation. The fact that Gordy Griep is such a ridiculous theatrical character to play into comedy, but also not shy away from the layers of projection and pleas for romance, where for as many reasons as you should not like this guy, probably even hate him, some of it might strike a little too close to home. Maybe it's a sign of how many guys think they can play into that Leisure Suit Lothario type, either sincerely or ironically, with the hope that it somehow works. But by the time we get to the broad act of the bridge that the working girl puts on in order to satiate his desires, you get a much sharper look into what underscores his fragile ego and a lot of the games that are played out in these scenes that frequently fly over the line. It's just a note-perfect recreation of this scene, where even if you've never met a pickup artist or an escort, the sheer vivid discomfort paired with a virtuoso flash, it blasts through really any of the cringe and kind of finds something miraculous. Gross, but miraculous, all the same.
Some cabaret. Meet me down with a broken heart and stay. Lie together, tell me lies, baby, I don't mind. I ain't the hurting kind.
Yeah, this might be the best thing that Midland has ever done. The smoky acoustic guitars echoing into the lead, where there's a shocking amount of chemistry with Orville Peck and the vocal interplay for that late night barroom hookup, where they acknowledge that, quite frankly, none of this is gonna last, but they can handle the lies. They aren't about to get hurt by it, at least not right now. And when you factor in that solo and the slowdown for the bridge and a terrific blend that ramps up impeccably for the final hook. Okay, look, I know this is probably overlooked in comparison with many of the other Orville Peck collaborations that might be flashier or bigger names. This is a little less theatrical, a little more conventionally structured and written, but it was also easily my favorite from the album. Criminally underrated, absolutely worth another chance.
There's too much pain here in this soul. What's one more drink alone? Trying to kill two birds with one stone.
I told her that I loved her and she just cried. Jesus, if there's a line that's gonna rip your heart out, I think it's that one. Where if you watch the breakup in real time and you watch Wade Bowen try to process the misery with one more whiskey, the finality of it all is just crushing. You can tell Wade Bowen absolutely blames himself for all this just blowing up in his face. That he was trying to preserve something that he couldn't, and now what's one more drink alone? Pair that with the supple production from Bowen himself, where he lets so much of the guitars hang in that negative space and the pedals steel and the piano and that accent across the brief solo. Yeah, most of the rest of Flying is nowhere near this sad, but sometimes you can recognize a mature moment of grief where it actually manifests. Excellent song. Okay, I know rap technically does not need pop crossover songs anymore when the biggest rap songs in 2024 can just dominate pop culture on their own, but if there is something from that era that at least radio could turn into a crossover smash, it is this. Mooney Long has been the secret architect behind a lot of sticky hooks in hip-hop and R&B, but this might be her best, especially when she stacks her main for the harmony around the aching pianos on the hook, and Glorilla is phenomenal as the girl who's trying to help out a friend escape an abusive relationship. So no, Joe Budden, this is not just about ratchet girls who get what they deserve. The fact that you just conveniently ignore what's in the text of the song in front of you in order to fuel gender war nonsense, it remains one of your more embarrassing qualities. But one of Glorilla's greatest strengths is both her bruising attitude and her sense of empathy. And for as much as she wants to tear this guy a new one, she's also trying to be tender, and that's a real impressive balance for her to strike. This is the sort of song that does sound like an obvious smash single, maybe of a different time. So yeah, make it happen.
Step ahead, step behind. Only rapper two-stepping with the metal spine. Even in decline, still ahead of my time. Evil Knievel in his prime, how's he even alive? Damn, I dare you devils adhere to the schedule. I ran like hell for years at this level. Whole family on my back, what I tell you. Even when the vertebrae cracked, I never fell through.
If you were wondering where B. Dolan has been since Epic Beardmen, this is the reintroduction that shows exactly how difficult recovery can be amidst a global pandemic, where you need to reconsider everything about your life and career, and where every single step can be a struggle. B. Dolan's greatest strength has always been his blunt honesty, with more of a systemic focus, and amidst the haunted vocal hook driving a lot of his production with a great bass line, and so many subtle melodic flourishes in the song, and the fact that his technical songwriting chops have grown by leaps and bounds, especially with a focus on that groove. His description of recovering from a spinal injury picks up a lot of that trudging detail, where he has been battered but coming out all the stronger. It's a killer album opener to a criminally overlooked rap record. Yeah, this went hard.
You find yourself. I hope you find yourself.
Yeah.
I hope you take your mask off.
Sad story. Yeah.
So, I've talked about this song at length on Billboard Breakdown, and ultimately it's the one that kind of stuck strongest for me from Chromacopia. The willowy hook from Daniel Caesar and LaToya Williams, the warping keys that careen into a gentle shuffling groove that pick up that beautiful swell, and the touches of horns on the third verse before getting more stripped back for that final verse after the key change. And while I really love how well Tyler describes the masks of the middle-class kid posturing to be a gangster that he really isn't, and then suffering the consequences, the preacher covering up his homosexuality, and then the bored housewife feeling like her identity is being subsumed into motherhood after sacrificing her dreams for it, the best part of the song is him taking that unflinching emotional honesty to himself as he grapples with aging, his own paranoia, the reality that his weird proclivities don't sell, and it further isolated him. And in following Call Me If You Get Lost, how he nearly ruined someone's marriage. And for as brutally honest as he proclaimed himself to be, that's its own mask. And it's haunting him. This is Tyler getting introspective and brutally real with himself with no deflection this time. And for me, that's always been the best version of Tyler. Excellent work.
Florida is one hell of a drug. Florida, can I use you?
I mean, this was gonna make the list even before it wound up as one of the best hit songs of 2024. Probably makes a little bit more sense here too as an album cut. Although I never understand how an artist with Taylor Swift's clout and fame doesn't throw it around as much as she could when it comes to releasing singles that might be more musically daring, or at least blunt some of the bad impressions of this album. In any case, it's basically a Florence and the Machine song where Taylor has better chemistry with Florence, its edge manifesting in the lurking swamps of Florida that promise a lot more than they can deliver, and the final crescendo, it's unreal. It sounds like nothing else in her catalog, but proving she can make more like this, it opens up so many doors. So back in The pithy lyric that has haunted me for nearly half a year is infatuated with folklore. In the context of the bar, it highlights how black capitalism bought into Reaganomics, and yet that delivered so little, no surprise. But Vince Staples is aware of his own culpability in producing art that chronicles the failures of that system. He looks in the mirror and sees something missing. And when he spends the second verse highlighting the other MCs on the West Coast who lost their lives, where the memorial is consecrated in a couple bars on a song, he wonders how much of any of that is going to be enough. Hell, as a music critic who might be infatuated with some of that same folklore, how much does that actually move anything? I miss the clanking drums, the scratching, the wells of seedy organ, and the eerie vocal sample around that jagged guitar royal. It's a West Coast groove fit for the blistering summer and the frigid winter nights all the same, hitting the blend of deceptively catchy but also punishingly bleak. Yeah, if that's a contrast that's had a long shelf life, might be this here.
This right here, this that shit that'll have you all inside of your feelings, confessing your love for the one. This right here, gonna make you put a ring on it, making calls about your feelings, confessing your love.
Okay, maybe it's just 2000s nostalgia at the end of the day for a killer power ballad by one of the best singers in R&B, proving that he still has it. Even if it doesn't reinvent any wheels, Usher knocked this out of the goddamn park. The stacking of the vocal leads, the shimmering keys behind that trap percussion, the subtle touches of the strings fleshing out that mix. And it's a song all about a love song that is so potent it creates a feedback loop in order to intensify those feelings. It's one of them ones for that special one person. And yeah, there's definitely an element of self-love in this. Usher is keenly aware that he's probably the best currently working making a song that's like this, but at the same time, there is something to be said about when you do love yourself and then you find that music that lets you share it with everyone else or that one special person. The synergistic response, pure magic. Another deep cut from an album I think is criminally underrated. Yeah, you know what? He should have really pushed this too.
A camera zooms into the atmosphere, and all that's left to see here is piles and piles and miles of trash.
Might be a bit contentious in some circles that this is making the list, in that it is technically spoken word poetry set to very atmospheric, smoky country western tones. But you know what? B. Dolan did it for me in 2015, and 9 years later, Karen Jonas knocked this out of the park with a penultimate moment that makes your stomach drop for all of its vivid detail. For as warm and enticing as the throwback vibes of the rise and fall of American kitsch were, with only traces of the darkness that was lurking behind, this is the moment where it gets borderline uncomfortably real. Consumers trash for as far as the eye can see. An ocean of debris tied to memories both good and bad, but fading with time and age, all of them. And Karen Jonas doesn't shy away from how life events in which she invested with so much money fill some of that same junkyard. An overpriced wedding dress, a car she can't fix, treats that feel like cheap sugar. And while she tries to find a place in her art and heart for all of that, imagining a world where there's nothing more left to buy, it's a poem she ultimately has to set on fire to wearily get back into her damaged car and keep on working. Easily one of the darkest and bleakest moments I heard in music that pretty much all goddamn year.
Life is all about timing. Love is wild and blinding. Every road is winding, so let the good times roll.
And thus, on the flip side, sometimes you need that soaring blast of Texas country with an infectious, soulful chorus where Wade Bowen operates as both your coach and cheerleader to keep on dreaming big. I went back and forth whether this or 2 Hertz 1 Stoned was my favorite, but the title track ultimately won out for how exuberant and driving it is. In between the multi-tracked hook and the warm rush of the guitars and the thrum of the groove, it's the perfect summer country song which is all about feeding into that vibe, where you're almost surprised by how good you're feeling, so why not embrace it? Sometimes you need to find moments that just soar at the loudest volume available. For me, this year, this was that. But you know, speaking of songs that assure you you're on the right path despite your own misgivings,
Reaching out on my way home. Could be so cold, I'll try again. You make me sad and second guess myself. Could be so cold, Midwest Indigo.
yeah, I know. The synths are discordant and blaring and awkward that open up the song. But when you recognize that might as well be the klaxon symbolizing the second guessing and panicking on the song, the firm bass and rush of the drums are exactly what you need as that stabilizing force. And the melodic twinkle moves into a much better register. And maybe part of it is that I'm just a real sucker for when someone makes a song about being in a panicked rush. Alabama's got a great song like that from the early 90s as part of my childhood. And 21 Pilots know how to key into that chilly anxiety like clockwork. But the best part of it comes in the subtle switch up for the second pre-chorus. Chill out, man. We're right on time. Placing the song, and indeed all of Clancy, in the category of largely overlooked meta-commentary on the band's career and not some overworked lore, this is the moment where, in getting older and trying to keep oneself together, it looks bleak, but you can't run away from those problems either. It's better to meet them head on. The sleeper hit from that album, but you know what, man? Never left my rotation this year. I gotta recommend it.
Wanna do, I'll drive you through midnight. Let it rain, baby, rain. Till we slide into the eye of a hurricane.
Okay, yeah, the pun in the title is silly, and describing a tumultuous relationship or a partner like a hurricane, you might want to have a slightly quicker tempo if you want to go for it, rather than a more languid alternative R&B vibe that Miguel should have cut a decade ago. But if we're not getting anything from him that's worth a damn, Lucky Day has the confident flair and charisma to really fill that role, alongside the watery, beachy flair of the guitars and the slick reverb shuffle of that groove. He's always been a little bit of a chameleon, and it's hard for me to not hear the other artists who could have cut this song, but the thicker vocal mix feels so warm and enticing, with an excellent hook and stacked melodic motifs. This was the summer jam for me when you wanted the vibes to just feel phenomenal, immaculate. But you know, if you want the flip side...
But if I find them on that island first, the worst is yet to come. No blood in the mud, I raised and spent life on the run.
This might be one of the angriest songs Zach Bryan has ever written, and quietly one of his darkest, at least before the outro erupts with the horns and the pure shredding to end out the track. The main character hears his brother has gotten into trouble with a gang. Zach Bryan knows that a violent fight with those wild boys might be coming and might end badly. It sure is not going to be pretty, only to discover that his brother chose to run with them. And then you get the sick feeling in your gut that Zach Bryan's character is not pulling back at that realization. An ass whooping's gonna happen, and if he has to knock his brother's teeth out as well as the gang's, well, so be it. What's very telling about the context of the album is that the moral standards are just muddy as all hell, and Zach Bryan's character does not believe he's a crusader for any kind of justice. This is family business is gonna get ugly, where you're not about to like or really respect anyone who's involved. Which might be why this fan favorite picked up a very different replay value and timbre after this past fall. The nasty sort of fight song. But yeah, this year I could use a couple of them. And while we're in that territory, it always seems to surprise people that outside of the adult alternative ballads that really broke out Snow Patrol, they always had a heavier, harder side, and it translated to a monster of a comeback album, and the first of a couple songs that made this list. Now, this isn't the darkest song on the album by any stretch, but it's by far the most gnarly and propulsive, the sort of reckoning with messy, ugly feelings towards an ex, where Gary Lightbody is haunted by that figure, a better animal that he drove away with all his own demons, but it's also a road that can't be traveled again because it would pull him down into that same dark path, and there's just way too much history to ignore. All of which could lead to a moment of melancholy that's more quiet. That's how the song started, but when you got that chiming minor key piano, the faint sizzles of the synth, the wailing backing vocals, and that implacable groove that ramps into the galloping hook, this is more of an exorcism by fire by any means necessary. The anger is that palpable. And you know, while we're on that note,
now let me say I'm the biggest hater. I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. I hate the way that you sneak this. If I catch flight, it's gonna be direct. We hate the bitches you fuck, cause they confuse themselves with real women. Then notice I said we, it's not just me. I'm what the culture feeling.
yeah, no surprise this is here. And given that I already said a lot in my best hit songs of 2024, what strikes me more about Euphoria is that how of the diss songs and the beef, it's probably aged the best. It's the big reason that Meet the Grams is not making this list proper. It's a song that kicked off a week in hip-hop that will live in infamy, a bruising assault on so many angles with 3 stellar beats, great hooks, and so many cutting barbs that any slight misfires kind of wind up getting overlooked in the cacophony of layered references, threats, and hilarious venom. This is my favorite Kendrick Lamar song in 2024, the first rap song I committed nearly entirely to memory in years. Goddamn, this was special.
Nobody stays together. This is where the worlds collide. This is where the worlds collide forever.
I think midway through Haven, Marianas Trench realized the limits of metatext and retracing their own stories. They had to get bigger. They had to grow up, face new challenges head on, and the vast gulf of possibilities that now yawns before them, they manifest in this titanic song. Starting off with a piano line that kind of reminds me a little of Mark Cohn's Walking in Memphis, which is another song all about retracing musical legacy. Nice touch there. The layers of drums, strings, woodwinds, horns, and guitars start piling in before we get the key changes and deliberate callbacks to Masterpiece Theater, and the groove just keeps galloping forward, and at so many moments you can feel it all start to spill out of control as the overdubs will capture that haunted snarl. It is absolutely pure camp, not a trace of irony to be seen, and perhaps most resonant for those who have actually heard Marianas Trench and Josh Ramsey for over a decade like I have, especially as it's not the first time that Marianas Trench has found some resonance and emotional power interweaving past songs and epics. But then Josh Ramsey just hollers that final hook, and the best voice working in pop rock blows me away yet again, to the surprise of nobody.
Everything's here and all.
Okay, yeah, more Snow Patrol, and this one, hell, it sounds like an anthem the National would have written at their heaviest, especially with Gary Lightbody dipping into his lower register on that bridge. He kind of sounds like Matt Berringer. And while Snow Patrol does the National as something that seems weapons grade built for me, there are differences that do make this unique to Snow Patrol. The distant pianos establishing and holding that melody, the slow build of the bass, the unabashed earnestness and the desperate plea to hold the love together, even as it can all feel like it's on the brink. But for me, it's the guitar roar on that hook. It hits like a sledgehammer. And then the bridge, where the glittery guitar layers are paired with the gorgeous vocal layering and the drums that are just ramping up. For me, this was the first moment on that Snow Patrol album that thoroughly convinced me that the band I knew and once loved had some goddamn muscle back. Man, I love this. No mincing words, if Lucky Day had brought the hook back just once after the key change, this could have been my top song of 2024. I know it flows naturally into the softer and slower closing cut Diamonds and Teal, which is a really good song, just not one I completely love. I'm not gonna begrudge him for that change. But look, Lemonade's something else. The slow build off the tight bass and the percussion as the vocals are allowed to slowly saturate the mix amidst the guitar twinkles that build into that killer chorus with the perfect overdubs. All about a song that's recognizing love is slipping through his fingers. Perhaps is also on the cusp of ending, and he needs to properly focus on what and who really matters. And yeah, the main metaphor is a little overused and tired, but this is how you make it work in spades for a fantastic penultimate moment on this album. Perhaps my favorite R&B song of the year from a terrific and overlooked album. If you haven't heard it, you should.
And I got something ringing in your ears. When everything we love becomes a picture of a simulation, it wakes me in the middle of the night. I love you like an atom bomb, but I become a cold reactor.
It's funny, this feels like the direct other side to the emotions of Lemonade, someone who is so overworked in a project that they can't even contextualize, losing contact with the larger world, slipping away, and one's partner where he only has emojis in order to capture that deep-seated depression and panic and loneliness. A figure described as kind of satanic because everything, they are canny enough to interweave some of their commentary on toxic masculinity, that through line right through the late capitalism metaphor, and it works like a goddamn charm. And once you have that context, the emotional dynamics, they just keep on making a terrifying sort of sense. The juxtaposition of someone who is looking to escape that system compared to those who are just kind of detached and who have bought into something that they don't even really fully understand. The desensitization that's inherent in the technology around them, the inability for anyone on top to actually give them a detailed answer, and the fact that it's all inside an insanely catchy song with the heavy thrum of the bass and the feminine vocal echo that's bouncing off of it as the chiming guitars and synths bounce off of that groove, paired with Jonathan Higgs's, let's say, peculiar yelp leaping across octaves. Again, this is why I have no patience for prog rock that chooses not to write hooks, when you can get this instead.
It's not that I don't love my bitch, but I don't love these side hoes neither. She throwing that shit back at me and I'm catching it like I'm a wide receiver. I know these losers, you fucking ain't hitting it right, I'm Derek Jeter. Hard on my sleeve, even catching my fist. Chase a dream, maybe not just a bit. I can believe that this hoe got me breaking, I'm breaking like this.
I remember being stunned that it was a Janet Jackson sample. I should have recognized it immediately. It's from Control, but JPEG Mafia bends and layers it in a way that kind of reminded me more of Björk or Imogen Heap. It's truly stunning, and then he's gonna break your heart as Peggy breaks into an acoustic ballad where, yeah, he is spitting, but he also sounds like he's on the verge of tears. It's the album closer that has him hitting rock bottom, where in one line he knows he needs more therapy than just an hour a week, but he also thinks he can fix himself, as a lot of guys do, where every win comes with a loss. He's trying to keep up the facade of a boss, but he can't break the child-proof lock on his car, where rarely has the flex of throwing money at white strippers sounded so dejected. It's the sort of song where he's trying to lash out. He's trying to keep everyone else at bay, but note the shift in language. After a line, "My bitch didn't get taken from me, I lost her myself," across the hooks there is a shift in language from bitches and hoes to girl, highlighting how far he is breaking down. And then the song ends abruptly with Peggy stepping away from the mic, saying that he's been working on this shit for a long time, it's finally over. One of the few moments where the studio chatter actually works for me because it shows how entangled the art and the personal growth are for him. Metatext that's echoed in the quiet reassurance of the song's title, or at least we hope so. I mean, there's nothing else I can add here. Nothing more cruel I could say than what Peggy has already said to himself. And this is a tour de force.
Grab the matches, start a fire, throw the memories in flames, it's behind us. See the gold in the red, no horizons, let it burn, let it burn.
Yeah, it should be absolutely no surprise this is here. It's only the single I've been wishing that Shaboozey could push since I heard and reviewed that album that actually appears to predate a bar song Tipsy. But for me, this is a lot more interesting in its fusion of country, folk, and rap with a monster of a crescendo. The warm acoustics amidst the windswept reverb of the track, the huge stomp clap that erupts with that echoing millennial whoops or something close to it, that only seems to get louder before we get the banjo on the final hook, and a faster rap cadence and patter on the second verse that kind of tumbles around the beat in a way that only seems to ramp up the desperate exuberance for this girl to just burn down everything with that X and then take to the road. And I really love that Shaboozey does not place himself in the narrative in the song. He just provides the anthem. You actually have to make the mess and then let it burn yourself. Kick ass!
And if she ever gets close to me, well, it's plain to say she'd incinerate me, but I don't mind her giving me her sunshine smile.
Okay, I bet this is the big surprise for everyone, especially given how harsh I was to Jacob Collier. But this is a case for all the virtuoso talent and the layering. When it comes to making a straightforward electronic rock love song that goes hard as hell, you get the focus and you get the refinement that I have been pleading to see. Not letting the ideas get so overworked and cluttered so much as ramping up the core conceit to its most enormous form. I like how his voice is bent and warped through all the processing to sound faintly inhuman. Honestly a little goofy. It works for how over the top the lyrics feel, even as the brittle acoustics break into something that's close to dubstep warping around that hook. And that over the top kooky flair keeps adding in elements. The little dial-up sound, the electric guitars wrenching at the edges of the drop, the vocal overdubs getting even louder, the funkier guitar touches around the vocal embellishments on the bridge as the percussion gets more dense. And yeah, you know what? That key change where it all just goes completely over the top, goes to 11, and it earns it. When love feels simultaneously scorching and deeply silly, you can get something special. And against all odds, I think he stuck the landing.
Come with me to the monster.
Look, I said earlier there were any number of choices for the best song from Mountainhead, but to me, this was the centerpiece. Where at the base of that nightmarish mountain, you get a glimpse of the flimsy sales pitch to keep buying in, and a snapshot of what could be waiting at the top of that mountain. And as such, the song just feels immense. The watery drips that break into the brittle plucks as the vocal harmonies sound so promising, and then that lockstep groove rolls in for the hook. There's so many brittle edges that highlight the fragility even as it gets more ponderous, ominous meat around that minor key hook. It's probably the closest to Get to Heaven that Everything delivers on this album, but with more melodic focus. It almost becomes as hypnotic as that titular stone itself. Now, incidentally, if you're looking to make more of an anti-technology screed, I really like how it's framed here the best. A myopic religion amidst the hierarchy, offering crumbs to the very bottom and encouraging crude vanity at the top. Neither which feels all that satisfying on a base level. It's sociological storytelling and it works like a charm. And yeah, it's maybe the most out there of the songs that made this list, but from that album, it remains my favorite. Strange winds blowing indeed.
Hold me in the fire till it's alright. Hold me in the hurt until we're free.
It's rare when I find a song where I think, you know, I didn't think they had to go this hard, but I'm kind of thrilled they did. And that's the Snow Patrol song, with 2 credible key changes before the hook even comes in off that rattling minor key guitar, and that flips into something that can soar off the pre-chorus with the piano accenting the main riff, and then flipping another gear for the hook. And then we get to the content, the sort of deeply rooted relationship conflict where the way to heal it is passing through the fire so the blade does not break, with enough desperation in order to set the stakes, but enough yearning confidence to make the hook feel like there is a tangible chance they're actually going to stick the landing. At the end of the day, I'm frankly stunned that Snow Patrol could deliver 3 of the best rock songs I heard this year. I don't think I could have ever predicted that in the past 20 years, maybe even during their heyday. But man, if you want to hold on to some fire, this is the way you do it.
In front of men built like wire, thrilling the sick leave, vainglorious men, fulfilling as a dry heave.
I'm realizing that after last year's list of my favorite songs were replete with horniness, there has been some between the lines, but not as much here as you might expect. Well, here's Hamish Hawk delivering one of the more tastefully raw slices of queer romance I heard in 2024, with pounding guitars careening off the organ, Hamish Hawk's terrific poise balancing out the yearning with the sexual intensity, and also balancing high cultural references with heaving and sweaty carnal adventures that leave him in a decidedly unsettled state, especially as you can hear all the insecurity coursing beneath this track. Seeing men that disbelieve his commitment to them, and who also just might discard him. I mean, to them, music means war. Does it mean that much to Hamish Hawk? I think if you're straight passing at all, it is a weird front and middle ground in order to approach, where you're not content to be another man in someone's dreams, and maybe the whole experience doesn't fully connect as much as you would like it to, but your attraction to it is not fading or going away, and the blur of tense passion feels wiry, constantly questioning. Of course, it helps that the mix is a masterclass of landing that jagged tension, and the hook drives towards an absolute banger. But if you want to challenge projection, both someone else's or maybe your own, yeah, this is that full stop.
I ain't really into flashing, I feel like an accident I'm never chose. Baby talking voice of passion, I feel like it's corny if you ain't on code. Niggas be on my dick for nothing, I be like, what happened to these niggas, bro? Like niggas be really going through, but there's a better way to let the people know.
You know, maybe this is the weirdest song of 2024 on sample alone to make this list. An AI recreation of Al Green singing Future's Turn on the Lights, lush with strings even before that change-up. The JPEG Mafia flipped into one of the most striking engagements with one's ego that I heard all year. And it's not pretty. If you acknowledge the layers of facsimile implied by the sample and the reference to Tony Montana doing coke, the line in your head, "Don't get high off your own supply," it's screaming, and Peggy knows that. I mean, he wishes his girl was more faithful or a better actor. He acknowledges how single-minded focus can throw chaos in a messy industry before you can even acknowledge his own messy legacy, including a brag that references Tegan and Sarah that should offend me a lot more than it does. But then you get the references to Michael Jackson and Man in the Mirror, or Chris Paul on the Warriors, which already feels dated, and honestly, that's kind of prescient in and of itself, where the money might not be fully there the way it should be, but he's got so many tweets, and he's hoping that his kids won't be as weak as he is. The song's beautiful. It's probably one of the reasons that it's Peggy's probably his biggest streaming song to date, but it's also so deeply sad and revealing in the jagged vulnerability. I mean, I could repeat what I said in my review to him, but the reality I know is that he's already said worse to himself. Paradoxically, that gives me hope.
You woke up feeling like you got crushed by a boulder, scratching at the fleas and another day older. Roll up out of bed, put the kettle on the stove plate, wait for the cobwebs to go away. As I recall, yesterday was gonna be the one. You were about to hit the road and you had him on the run. Here you come, talking about your new plan of attack, but you may have made a few wrong moves in the trap.
When I first heard this song, My first thought, it was that canceled Coyote versus Acme movie in which this might fit entirely too well. Hell, with that chirpy piano and the sharp groove and the echoing vocal snippets around the scratches with some of the sing-song elements and that oddly soulful feel to its production, I think it might be accessible enough to actually work there. But that would also miss the point of this song. It's not just about Wile E. Coyote. It's an extended and rather brilliantly realized exploration of a certain stripe of underground rapper who might be their own worst enemy in the failed come-up between the arrogance and misogyny and just really bad decision-making all across the board, all which takes away from someone whose persistence and their genius, it is apparent, just never fully realized the way it should be. And while I love the light touch and humor throughout the song, which can actually get pretty dark, what I love most is the sense of empathy. B. Dolan probably knows dozens, if not hundreds of guys who are just like this. He might even see a bit of himself in this picture. And the note-perfect detail and advice in both chiding that lifestyle and offering a new path forward, it feels really special. It's the album's centerpiece and standout. If I introduce people to B. Dolan, as much as I would prefer they run through the gauntlet of the failure, this is probably the best way to do it. Truly a special song.
Running with my dress unbuttoned, screaming, but daddy, I love him. I'm having his baby. No, I'm not, but you should see your faces. I'm turning to Flora through the fences. No, I'm not coming to my senses. I know he's crazy, but he's the one I want.
Yeah, I know, there goes all my cred. Taylor Swift is in my top 5 yet again. But look, I spoke at length as to why I adore this song and the intensely personal connection I have to it in my top 10 best hit songs of 2024, even if it was barely a hit and it clung to its success via album bomb. I will say that it was deeply satisfied to see a lot of people, even those who don't like Taylor Swift or that album, give me the shrug of, okay, I get it, or, I don't care for it, but good for you and all that. And while I will argue the song and the album deserve a lot more, look, there's no need for me or anyone else to come to the defense of Taylor Swift. And as much as this song is intensely personal for me this year, I think I can leave it at that. That's nice for once. This should not work at all. Across the board. The bricked out, noisy production on the hook that sounds imported from a low song, the abrupt ending, the fact that Josh Tillman's being unabashedly earnest in spite of himself across the song, you keep waiting for the turn to irony or deflection and it just doesn't happen. For many, that's gonna break the song. It won't work for them. It's way too sincere to stick this landing, and Father John Misty knows it. I mean, the optimist is gonna shoot the lamplight out of the brakeman's hand. This should be a catastrophe. And yet, the piano accented by the gorgeous strings, the fact that Josh Tillman's religious upbringing would give him every reason to pause, disdain this, and yet, the fact he was willing to be taken to the outskirts by those who still believe in something, terrified by the fact that those who love him might abandon him if he reveals any genuine belief. And for the final verse after the bridge, he sees every wound exposed, likely facing a God that isn't there, but folks who still aspire to believe in something more, be it God or just love, a commodity of mutual scarcity. If there's a song that got to me on a level that's hard to contextualize, feels a little bit too personal this year, yeah, it's this one.
Like damn, why I get a bitch like Yearn? I'm a drop top nigga, the sun won't burn when I live like what, but the stripes ain't earned. I'ma get it right now, I ain't waiting no turn. Got a brand new house, tryna avoid my hurt. About 6 point something in the field like church. Or the hood got whack and the set went turn. Got a 488 in the glide like Kurt.
Whereas, if I'm looking for an outright jock jam in 2024 that should have been played everywhere, it's this song. Arguably one of Schoolboy Q's best ever tracks, with that quaking stutter of bass that felt so forward-thinking in West Coast rap. Boy, was I wrong on that this year. And then he just starts flowing and it's goddamn spellbinding. And while I often get bored by a lot of rappers who are bragging about how much they have, when you've got this sort of attitude attitude and style and an incredible flow that just does not stop. That's the fucking watermark for me. But part of it is just bragging better. I'll say it again. I like Schoolboy Q talking about living off golf endorsements. I like the flavorful attitude and his expressive exasperation, and he proves that he doesn't have to drop names and all the gang flexing to be menacing as all hell. I can't count how many times this was on my workout playlist, or I just listened to it on my way to the gym. It was very nearly my favorite rap song of 2024, but before we get to that...
A new mantra every other week. All my friends are finding new beliefs.
Okay, I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by this. I've only been quoting this song in reviews all damn year, and not for the album, where Katie Pruitt not only sees the exodus from Christianity, but then everyone who winds up chasing for something to believe anyway, be it drugs or tech or new age or whatever might give their life some sense of meaning or purpose. It's an incredibly apt observation, but where I think the song really has teeth for me comes in the production and the framing. The louder distorted guitars, that huge hook that's full of overdubs. It's the biggest song that Katie Pruitt has probably ever made, something that's built more for a festival stage for an audience who, let's be honest, probably won't get it, but it's also not quite judging for it. It's observational, it's a little bit exasperated and kind of frustrated, and pressing against the edge of, look, I told you so, from somebody who has seen every ugly underbelly of some of those mantras and some of those beliefs in religion, but fuck, how far removed is she from it? We're all desperate to feel something divine. This was the leap that I was praying, no pun intended, that Katie Pruitt would make. It is comfortably her best song. Very easily could have been my top spot.
In the ghetto, I'm a Martian, crash landing. In them dirty ass apartments, stay shining. I forever be the hardest, big time. Like the niggas in New Orleans, real shine. Like the niggas from Magnolia. Chopper City in the ghetto, I'm a soldier. Where they at, get the gas, huh? Where they at, get the gas?
You know, I did not expect the first time I ever put a rap song as my #1 favorite of a year, it would be from Vince Staples, but at Two-Face, something else. The sort of track where I know in my mind why it wasn't a crossover chart-topping hit, but it feels wrong that it wasn't. It should have been. The spare, ominous knock accented with bare synth warbles after the barking dogs and the fireworks or gunshots. In fact, you really can't tell the difference. That's part of the point. It culminates in a killer groove with a hook that you're gonna like on the first listen and is unstoppable for as many times as you will hear it all summer or all winter. Vince's music really feels like it's for all seasons, even with that New Orleans bounce breakdown near the end that's note perfect. And it's dark in a way that feels both uneasy and kind of prescient. Local to the core, rooted in a place that's rife with violence, but it's home, where you can tell that he's got a very firm knowledge of the limits of what he can change in that home, finding beauty in the darkness like Rembrandt. It's one of those classical art references that kind of suck you into the stark realization that Vince Staples is nearly always the smartest guy in the room, even when he's saying very little. But while there is a celebratory groove, the danger is around every corner. He could have wound up on a shirt so much like any other rapper, but going further, he also sees the larger systemic nightmare that's in view beyond the history of Jim Crow, where his granny ran away from it, and the religion that's used to ostracize and demonize. One of the most notable lines is, "The ghetto is a mismatch." And as much as he loves to call the trap his home, the reality of living in it is bleak as the hell where he thinks he's probably going to land, especially when he acknowledges that the corporate interests, they only want this, but they never grasp why. The label didn't understand or get Big Fish Theory. They didn't like anything else after it. It didn't sell as well, but Vince stuck to his lane. At least before the crackers all tore it down. A metatextual echo where Vince is gonna mock every white person who shows up at his shows who just never get the point of his own systemic oppression in which they likely contribute. But hey, he's aware of what it takes to survive. Riding the stick like witchcraft. Another ridiculously clever line given the album's engagement with women as a whole and how the history of how witches were persecuted in the United States is deeply tied to racist oppression. How wicked. But the larger question is that when all of this hits everyone else, what are you about? I'll admit that in comparison with some years where the #1 felt overpoweringly obvious, this is not one of those picks. Yet in 2024, I couldn't imagine anything else in this spot. What can I say? I love this shit. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I'll admit, I'm a little bit surprised how all this turned out, but I'm really confident with this list. I put the time in. I hope you all do as well. Put your own list down in the comments below. I'm curious how wildly different all of them are going to be, because these sort of songs lists, they often are. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you want to see one of these lists earlier, or just talk with me on my Patreon, or get albums on the schedule, which is now firmly opening up for January, link to Patreon and link to my YouTube memberships is right over there. Don't feel obligated. Tough times if you can't tell, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.